Morning, this is Chair French, and I'm convening the regularly scheduled business meeting of the Kansas Corporation Commission for this Tuesday, May 4th, and it is 10 a.m. On today's business meeting agenda, we have 11 consent agenda items, 2 noticed items, and 1 discussion item. We will begin with our consent agenda items. Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review the items on the consent agenda. And I'll ask if you have any questions with those items, starting with Commissioner Duffy.
I do not.
And Commissioner Keene, do you have any questions about the consent agenda items? It appears you are muted, Commissioner Keene.
Probably better than reading my lips. I have no questions either, and I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
I second Commissioner Keene's motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. The consent agenda is approved. We will now move to our noticed items. Our first noticed item is in docket number 21, EKCE 381 COM, and this is a proposed order on prima facie determination. And our presenter for this item is Mr. Brian Fedotin. Brian?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
On March 31st, Virginia Loppy, the complainant, submitted a formal complaint against Evergy Kansas Central, alleging that her bill was too high and questioning the accuracy of her meter. The order finds the formal complaint fails to advise of any provisions of law, regulations, or commission orders that have been or are being violated by the acts or omissions complained of, or that will be violated by a continuance of acts or omissions. It fails to set forth concisely in plain language the facts claimed to constitute violations, and fails to state relief sought by the complaint. Therefore, the complainant is given 30 days to correct the procedural deficiencies that I just mentioned. And if the complainant fails to amend the formal complaint that in a way that satisfies KR 82-1-220B, the formal complaint will be dismissed without prejudice. This order finds that the complaint does not establish a prima facie case for commission action. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Brian. I'll turn to my fellow commissioners now for any questions on this proposed order, starting with Commissioner Keene.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Duffy.
I have no questions, and I move approval for the adoption of this order.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the described order. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. The order is approved. Our second noticed item is a proposed order on prima facie determination, this time in docket number 21 MDRE 403 COM. And again, our presenter is Mr. Brian Fedotin. Brian?
Yes, thank you. On April 23rd, Earl Fry submitted a formal complaint against the city of Moundridge, alleging his gas bill is excessive. KSA 66104 excludes municipally owned or operated utilities from the commission's jurisdiction. Likewise, KSA 66131 prohibits the commission from reviewing the rates charged by municipally owned or operated natural gas utilities. Therefore, the commission lacks jurisdiction over the city of Moundridge and finds that this formal complaint fails to establish a prima facie case for commission action. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Brian. Do the commissioners have any questions on this order? And again, I'll begin with Commissioner Keene.
Not for me, thank you.
Commissioner Duffy?
Just a comment, please. I think Mr. Fry notified us out of sheer frustration and concern about the high cost of natural gas that appeared on his bill during the polar vortex. He is just one of thousands throughout this state who again were so negatively impacted by that week of dramatic increases in gas prices and low temperatures. Unfortunately, we have no jurisdiction over the city of Moundridge. And I think, again, so much of the public does not really fully appreciate or understand who is responsible when there is an issue. And I'm hoping that as our staff continues to investigate and review this incident, as well as the Attorney General's office, that we will be able to provide answers to these folks who are left with devastatingly high bills that will impact them for a long period of time. And with that, I do move approval of this order.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the described order. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. The order is approved. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
We will now move to our last item, which is a discussion item, and this is a quarterly update to the commission from our Public Affairs and Consumer Protection Division. And our presenter is Ms. Linda Berry, Director of PACP. Linda?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this morning and provide an overview of PACP's work over the past 3 months, and as well as their assistance to state ratepayers. So I do have a brief presentation. I'd like to share my screen. So if you can just confirm that you're seeing that right now.
Yes, it is up.
Perfect. Okay. So this morning's presentation will be in regards to activity over the third quarter, the months of January through March. And I've compiled some information to give you a sense of not only the number of Kansans that have contacted our Public Affairs Office, but the types of complaints that we're hearing and the matters that they're most concerned about. I'll begin with a high-level overview. We received 574 complaints during that 3-month period. That is substantially up from the same period last year, and I'll have some comparisons to share with you. In terms of disputed dollars that were returned to consumers, we were able to return $9,443 approximately to ratepayers in helping them resolve disputes with their utilities. And that's really just about $68 shy of the total disputed amount. So we feel pretty good about how those efforts panned out. Our complaints were received from all areas of the state. And as you can see, the areas with the highest populations were the most common callers that we heard from. Sedgwick County is generally right at the top. This quarter, we had Johnson, Shawnee, Douglas, Wyandotte, Leavenworth, and Riley, which is a pretty typical lineup. Douglas moved up in the lineup a little bit. They're normally tied with Riley County. I think it's a collegiate competition thing, but this time they won out. So they had 30 complaints this quarter. Next, I'd like to show you the complaint volume by month. January, we had 136 complaints, which is pretty typical for that time of year. In February, we had 253, which is quite high compared to normal February calls. And on March, the numbers went down a little bit, but not to the level that we would normally see them in March. Because if you'll remember, during this time, the cold weather rules in effect, the temperatures are pretty cold. People are not having as many issues that time of year normally. So the next slide shows you a comparison between 2020, the same time frame, when we had 359 complaints versus 574 this quarter. And I think it's fair to say that the winter weather event in February made up the bulk of that. We had a lot of calls during that time, calls about the outages that took place. There were concerns from consumers that could not reach their utility company during those outage periods because of the call volumes, I'm sure. And then the anticipation of high bills, a lot of what Commissioner Duffy spoke about previously in the meeting. In March, the calls went down some, but still substantially higher than what we would normally see in March. So this has been an unusual quarter in terms of the number of callers. The next slide will show you kind of a breakdown by industry of what the calls were about. Electric is almost always the highest, and this quarter was no different. The other category you'll notice is pretty high, and I'm sure you'll remember that those are calls that are related to a company that is not regulated by the commission or a service that's not regulated by the commission. The next slide, I sliced the pie a little bit differently this time to show you a comparison between the blue bars, which are jurisdictional, and the gold bars, which actually broke out all the calls by industry, whether they were jurisdictional or not. You'll notice in the center, the other category dropped way down after that happened, and each of the other categories gained some complaints. Probably the most notable would be telecom. That was quite a difference once we included non-regulated calls. And part of that is because there are so many things that go into that category, things like cell phones, telemarketing, broadband, lifeline, just a lot of different things, FCC issues that fall into that category. And then on the end, you'll see water. We did get 23 calls from non-regulated water companies, and those were concerning things like disconnects, billing notices, those types of things. So I think this gives kind of a more broad spectrum look at what people are calling about and what they're concerned about. The next slide breaks down the complaint categories, and these categories, many appear across several industries. And non-regulated miscellaneous was the number one. That's not uncommon, followed by billing and quality of service. I think what's interesting about this, when you look at this quarter versus last year at the same time, is the pattern's pretty much the same. There were just more complaints during the third quarter of this year, with one exception, and that's the disconnection at the top. It's the third one down. Last year, we had 50 calls about disconnects. This year, only 10 during this time period. And I think that can be attributed to the fact that this year there were still a number of moratoriums in place, as well as a wide variety of payment plans that came out of the COVID relief efforts. So that is my last slide, but I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Linda. Well, let me turn to the other commissioners first to see if they have any questions, and I will start with Commissioner Keene. I see he's gone off mute.
You're too observant, Mr. Chairman. Linda, if we could go back for a moment to slide 6, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious here. Let's look at the other columns. What would other jurisdictional be? What would that be?
They would be things that we don't regulate. Probably a real common one we get is damages against a utility company. Particularly, you know, they're digging a project and my yard was damaged. Those are the kinds of things we would get. And I'd say that's probably the biggest one. Sometimes it's a dig-safe call that involves multiple companies that someone is asking about. Sometimes it is it's hard to pull out the most common, but I know damages are a very, very common one, or just something that we don't regulate. Maybe it's a marketing piece someone got in the mail and they don't feel like it was represented accurately, or just something that doesn't fall into our realm of jurisdiction.
Well, I was curious about it because it's quadruple. It's more than 4 times versus the industry generally. I was just curious about that. If we could go back to slide 4, I think it was, I'm sorry. Yes. I think there's a pretty obvious reason for the increases in complaints in February. I'm going to surmise that there's probably an analogous reason for March. There's somewhat of a lag there potentially, but it could be that we've got receipt of bills. I'm going to guess that for events occurring in February that might play into March. Is that possible?
That's not as much as the anticipation of high bills. Because our regulated companies are working to spread this cost out, people aren't seeing them yet, but people are reading a lot of news reports about municipal customers who are being faced with those costs and who are nervous about it, quite frankly, and what they may see going forward.
Very well. That really exhausts all the questions I had, Linda. I thank you once again for preparing this for us on a quarterly basis. It's really quite informative. I think it keeps us in touch with the events that impact your office from the public and the concerns they have. I thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Commissioner Duffy, do you have any questions for Linda?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chairman French. Linda, I do have a question concerning when you've received these calls from non-jurisdictional. I know you've been working with CURB to establish a relationship with complaints that your office receives that are not jurisdictional to us. So can you kind of talk about what's occurred over the last, during February, March, during this event, the winter event?
We have referred people to CURB if it's a non-jurisdictional issue. Primarily, CURB's role has been to help people who are jurisdictional and are considering a formal complaint, kind of work through that process and determine if it would be appropriate to file a formal complaint, and then to help them understand the factors that need to be included in that complaint so that it can be considered by the commission. Non-jurisdictionals, we have also sent over to CURB just to see if they can provide any additional ideas or relief for those customers. And I know as the legislature had worked through loan programs and the Attorney General's office has looked into matters as well, we can also, both our group and CURB can inform people of what the status of those issues are.
So as a lot of programs opened up during COVID for payment of utility bills, not deferrals or payment plans, but actual dollars, do you feel your office was receiving good information about pockets of money that were being made available? For example, City of Topeka had actual cash to hand out. United Way, throughout multiple United Ways in the state, had actual resources, cash resources to direct folks to. Were you made aware of these opportunities to try and move folks to, some options in terms of helping with their bills? And I guess I'm primarily referring to our non-jurisdictional.
We do keep a listing of all of those opportunities on our website, and we try very hard to stay on top of it. During the time period you were talking about, lots of things were happening very quickly. So as soon as we heard about something, we got it on our website, we shared with our group so that we could help people, even if they're not regulated by a utility that the KCC works with. We are always referring them to that list. We have it broken down by areas of the state so they can see specifically in their area what their city or some of the nonprofits in the area are doing to help. So I think we do the best job we've been able to date. I'm not saying there's not room for improvement, but we definitely try to stay on top of everything that's going on that could benefit our callers.
Okay. I do hope that if you feel you're not getting information from other state agencies or local units, that if there's anything that we as commission can do to say, hey, you know what, connect with us, because we will definitely drive people over to your website, to your information to help them. We know the problem is not resolved. People are going to continue to be hit with bills that they clearly did not anticipate at the time. And so I know your staff continues to receive phone calls from folks who, I mean, on top of the pandemic, this is very upsetting, very emotional. And I would like to, again, applaud your staff. They, for the last almost 18 months, have just been inundated every day with folks who, through no fault of their own, have been impacted by the pandemic or this winter storm. I know that can be very wearing, dealing with the public, but I also appreciate your staff's diligence in helping each and every person, because behind that caller is a family, is somebody who really is reaching out so that they can make ends meet, pay their bills, keep their head above the water. And sometimes folks unload on you, either angry or just given up. So I want to commend you and your staff for maintaining that calm and persevering again through another catastrophe that has hit this state hard. So thank you, and we'll continue to look forward to your reports. And again, if you guys need something, please give a shout out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. I don't know that I really have a question for you, Linda, other than to thank you. And I do think you made a really important observation, you know, that there is a lot of apprehension out there, people concerned about what their bill impacts have been, because as you mentioned, for our jurisdictional utilities, we did take that action to ask them to defer recovering those costs, to roll them up, and then come to us with a plan for how they'd recover them. And the longer that sits out there, I certainly hear people's concern of not knowing what the impact will be. I think, you know, everyone's anticipation is that it's going to be manageable, that we're going to do some things to make sure it's manageable. But we need to see those plans. And so I understand it's not simple to put the plans together, but I am very hopeful that we'll see them soon, and that people can have that weight lifted off their shoulders, that they will know you know, what the impact is and what the plan is, to make sure that we do recover those in a manageable way that doesn't materially harm folks. So I think that was a really important comment, and hopefully our utilities feel some urgency to come in and let us know how they plan to address those costs. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments to come before us on this topic? Well, if not, I think, Linda, you are off the hook, and we will move forward. Hearing no further business to come before us this morning, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to adjourn the business meeting. Those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.